I'm Allison Rushing, Director of Kids Ministry at Sojourn Midtown.
And I'm Jared Kennedy, Pastor of Families at Sojourn Midtown. Today we'd like to talk to you about a more serious topic, reporting suspected abuse and neglect. The first representation a child has of God is their parents and regular caregivers. That's a truth that should encourage us to be hyper-vigilant about protecting children from predatory or abusive influences. Sadly, most abuse takes place within the context of an ongoing relationship. Over 80% of the time, abusers are well known to the victim. They're the people we'd least expect. In Matthew 18, Jesus warns us, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. It's a strong warning, but it's one that highlights our responsibility before God to protect children.
We believe that reporting abuse is a responsibility we have before God, but it's also a responsibility we have before the governing authorities. It's important to know that all Sojourn Kids volunteers are mandatory reporters of abuse and neglect according to both Kentucky and Indiana law. So what do I do if I suspect that a child has been physically, emotionally, or sexually abused? The short answer is report immediately. In the case of suspected abuse by a staff member, volunteer, or parent, volunteers should immediately make a report to Child Protective Services. In Louisville, this number is 502-595-4550. In New Albany, this number is 812-949-4056. We also ask that you report your concerns to a safe staff person or pastor at the church. If you'd like, we're willing to call Child Protective Services with you. After all, you are a mandatory reporter, and we are mandatory reporters as well.
Here's a couple of things that are really important to know about reporting. First, it's not your responsibility or ours to substantiate your suspicions. We simply have a responsibility as a church community to comply with the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, and cooperate fully with both Child Protective Services and the law enforcement officials in our community. If you'd like to learn more about what constitutes abuse, take a look at the checklist that accompanies this video. But I encourage you to err on the side of caution and report any and every suspicion you have. Second, know that you should not discuss the report with other parents or child care workers. This is for the sake of privacy, but also if a child is disclosing that a parent or another adult is causing harm, do not talk with that parent or adult. Talking to a potential abuser could result in additional shame or abuse for the child. Instead, as we've already said, report right away.
One question that regularly comes up when we're talking about abuse reporting is the question of protecting yourself from accusation. This is important because appropriate physical contact with children can be really helpful and even necessary in a children's ministry environment. A hand on a child's shoulder may be helpful for aiding communication, redirecting attention, or calming restlessness. But physical touch can also be easily misinterpreted. So whether you are serving in children's ministry or just interacting with kids in your community group, here are a few simple rules to abide by. Always remain in open sight of other adults. Know that appropriate physical contact varies according to the child's age. What is appropriate for nursery-age children, such as holding, rocking, assisting in restrooms, etc., is not appropriate for kids in grade school. Sitting on laps, for instance, may be appropriate for a toddler, but it is not appropriate for a first grader. Because the majority of sexual offenders are men, our policy at Sojourn Kids is that only females may change diapers. Also, we don't change the diapers of children over age 5.
Also know that in some situations, a man will need to limit physical contact more than a woman would in the same situation, especially when working with older children. Next, all caregivers should refrain from roughhousing, wrestling, or giving shoulder or piggyback rides to children. Physical contact in group activities such as ultimate frisbee, freeze tag, touch football, etc., and youth group is reasonable and understandable, but rough play and the kind of personal attention given by a shoulder ride is not appropriate for a classroom setting. And generally speaking, these types of activities should be avoided in a community group setting as well, particularly if a child's parents are not present or within sight range. It's also important to use care and discernment when hugging a child. Brief side hugs when greeting or comforting a child are generally appropriate, but prolonged, frequent, or frontal hugs are just not. In older classes, volunteers should not initiate hugs, particularly toward children of the opposite sex. If an older child does initiate a hug, redirect them to a more appropriate contact, such as a gentle side hug or a high five.
Never touch a child on or near any region that is considered private or personal unless you are changing a diaper or assisting a toddler or preschool-aged child in the restroom. And never touch a child out of frustration or anger. Physical discipline is never an appropriate means of correcting someone else's child.
Thank you for joining us for this training on reporting and protecting children from abuse and neglect. These are heavy responsibilities that we take very seriously, and we trust that you will as well.